We're back with the second edition of SB Nation's MLS Cup playoff preview. We're here a few days away from the conference championships, where Toronto FC will face the Montreal Impact in the East, and the Colorado Rapids will play the Seattle Sounders in the West. Joining me today are bloggers representing those four teams. Oliver Platt of Waking the Red. Say hi, Oliver.
Hey.
Matthew Bouchard of Mount Royal Soccer.
Hey, guys.
Abby Mood of Burgundy Wave.
Hello.
And Dave Clark of Sounder at Heart.
Oh.
So we might as well start off in the East, where the Impact will be hosting Toronto FC in the first leg on Tuesday. Both these games are actually on the famous day of Tuesday, because that's the way I'm sure MLS totally wanted to do this, was play all these games on Tuesday. But anyway, this is supposed to be one of the biggest crowds in Montreal soccer history. Matthew, what is the mood like in Montreal, where it seems like of all the markets, that's the one that seems to be the most energized and is selling tickets basically as fast as they can open up seats?
Well, I tell you what, we're not really surprised here when it comes to a playoff match and against Toronto of all teams. I think everybody assumed that we were going to have big ticket sales. This year, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were the team that showed the biggest increase in average attendance by something like 4,000 compared to last year. So there's a lot more of a following. The promotional aspect is better. Marketing has been better, although not perfect. So yeah, it's really exciting. It's really exciting, and we're getting a lot of coverage across the different media. Actually, a really interesting point. This is one of the first times that RDS, which is the French-speaking TSN, has actually said they're not going to cover the Canadiens game on Tuesday, which is against Ottawa. They're going to put that on their secondary channel and make sure that the Montreal Impact is going to be on number one.
That's pretty impressive, because my understanding is the Canadiens are kind of a big deal in Montreal.
Small fry. They're below CFL.
Right. Because the mighty Alouettes, right?
Oh, God, they're terrible.
So, Oliver, speaking of Canada, what's the mood like in the bustling market of Toronto?
Pretty good. I think obviously it'll pick up a little bit ahead of the home leg. But they've sold, I think, 1,400 tickets was their allocation for the Olympic Stadium. So that'll be pretty cool to see, like a real away following.
Yeah.
Obviously, that doesn't happen very often, obviously, in MLS. So, and I'm sure there'll be many more spread out throughout the rest of the stadium too. So it should be a good night, yeah.
So for our viewers that maybe aren't super familiar with the geography of Canada, how far apart are Montreal and Toronto?
I think we're 500 kilometers.
Yeah, about that, I think.
Yeah.
So that's like 300 miles or something?
Yeah, it's a 6-hour drive.
Yeah.
Okay, 6-hour drive. Fair enough. So it's like the distance between Portland and Vancouver for those of us in the Cascadia region, and that's considered about as close of a rivalry as you're going to get outside of the East Coast in the United States, which is crazy.
Yeah. It's a 6-hour drive. It's a completely different world, man. Completely different world.
That's what all the travel shows tell me.
That's right.
So going over to the West, we have Dave Clark and Abby Mood. Abby, there's a ton of injuries that seem to be plaguing the Rapids. Are they going to be able to field the full 18?
I think we'll be all right. I mean, it's just the damn national team just keeps taking out all of our players, because that's how Jermaine Jones got hurt back in July. And now, yeah, Tim Howard's out. And Gashi's probably not playing on Tuesday, so we're hoping that he'll be back for the next leg in Denver. But, I mean, we have some good guys that can step up in there, so I'm not super concerned about it. I'm bummed. I'm just not super concerned.
So one of the other questions is around Jermaine Jones, who he played 160-odd minutes for the U.S. national team over the last week. So even though there was this huge break, he was playing as much as anybody. And he didn't look like he was exactly ready to play against Costa Rica. Is there any concern that he might not be fully fit for this one?
I mean, I think that's for sure a concern, especially because I thought that Klinsmann said he didn't want him to play that long himself, but things, kind of happened, and that's just what it was. But I'm hoping that more than anything, it just kind of helped him get into game shape a little more, because he had only had a couple games with us. That being said, I don't know that, how much time he's going to get in Seattle on turf. I would think that Pablo would reduce his minutes a little bit just to kind of save his body for when we come back to Denver. But I'm hoping that he'll still be, get a solid amount of minutes.
So, Dave, we now move over to Seattle, where there is, a fair amount of hype going into this thing. But I'm hearing that, I guess, it seems funny to say this, but there's only 40,000 tickets sold so far. What's your expectation? Is Montreal going to beat Seattle in terms of the big attendance number this week?
Absolutely. Seattle is not going to catch Montreal. They might, they're probably going to add a couple thousand. They're just kind of starting the hype out here, which is, you had a week and a half where you could have been mentioning the Rapids game regularly, but they're going into the weekend. Notice things like the Space Needle flag and several of the landmarks around the town are going to be paved green, but it's already we're 3-4 days from the game at this point. It seems like that relax rather than push towards a big ticket number, kind of the opposite technique of what Montreal took, where as soon as they found out they were going to be in a huge game, they started immediately everyone that they'd ever contacted and finding to get them into the stadium.
So the Rapids seem to be a little bit up against it in terms of injuries. Tim Howard is going to be out. Gashi looks like he's going to be out. There's a potential that Marco Papa may be out. Jermaine Jones is at least questionable. On the other hand, how are the Sounders looking? I know they had a bunch of their own injuries that they were worried about.
They have a bunch of guys that are coming back and should be nearly ready, kind of right on the edge of that. The one that's most likely going to be back that missed the last series is Ramon Torres. We know he's going to be back because he started for Panama during the international break, so that was his first game. He got his legs under him there, so he should be available to play for the Sounders on Tuesday. Alvaro Fernandez, Andres Ivanschitz, Brad Evans are the other significant players that have been dealing with injuries during this playoffs, and there's a chance that all three of those could be back as well. That's going to leave Brian Schmetzer with some interesting choices because his has included Hercules Gomez and Nelson Hato Valdez. One of those worked out quite well during the playoffs, and the other one put in his time and he put in his effort, but I don't think many Sounders fans looked at Herc and their preferred choice out on the wing in a must-win game.
So this is a question I want to kind of end with, but also open it up to a little bit of a discussion. We've alluded to this subject a little bit throughout this show, but the MLS ends up going to take I believe, a 16-day break between the conference semifinals and the conference finals. That's coming on the heels of 3 games in 8 days. So it's really led to this uneven kind of pacing of the playoffs, and it's quite unlike anything we see in other North American sports. In other sports, I mean, frankly, this is almost like if Champions League was not separated by those teams' league games. That said, I'll start with you, Matthew, because it seems like the Impact have taken the most advantage of this long break. Does it feel like this is a good thing and it's about how you use it, or does MLS need to figure out a way to get rid of this long break while also not playing through an international window?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I believe the only people that this actually affects is the fan base. When I look at the Montreal Impact, we have something like 7 or 8 of our players that were playing for their national teams during this week. So they got their training in. They're still in form. That's not a problem. But really, it's trying to keep the interest going over that long break, especially considering that, let's be honest, not many of us are watching the national teams during this, the World Cup qualifiers or the friendlies. And never forget, I mean, they have a schedule that overlaps with the NBA. The playoffs, for example, had overlapped with the baseball playoffs. NFL, so they're losing a lot of viewers. So having a break, I feel, has more of an effect on the fan base and potential TV viewership than anything else.
So what do you think, Oliver? Is this a good thing or a bad thing that we have this break? And does MLS, how big of a concern do you think it is that MLS needs to actually do something about it?
I think in an ideal world, you'd lose it, obviously. You want to keep the momentum and the interest levels going. I don't think it's a huge deal, really. Obviously, from a team's perspective, it allows people to potentially get healthy, rest up a little bit, and then be fresh for the last 3 games of the season. It's always going to be tricky because there's so many international windows at this time of year. Like there's the one in October. I think there's one at the end of September as well. So it would just seem to be impossible to navigate, like cramming in the entire regular season and then getting the playoffs in as well around it. I don't think it's going to be fixable, really. So just kind of have to live with it.
So, Abby, your team has been the one that seems to be most adversely affected in terms of on-field situations by this break. Of course, there was the Tim Howard injury, and we kind of spoke to the Jermaine Jones situation. Is there some palpable frustration among Rapids fans, or is it just we're happy to be here in the conference finals?
No, I mean, I think there's a little bit of frustration. I mean, like when those guys were saying, oh, it just affects the fans. Not in Colorado, because we're losing some of our big players. But I think that speaks more to the international play than necessarily the break. I mean, I don't know, because if you cut out the break but players have to leave for international play, then you could lose players for the playoffs that way too. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of bitter about it over here because of what's gone down. But I mean, I kind of agree that it would be great to shorten it, but I don't know what the solution is with all the international tournaments and stuff going on.
Well, Dave, we'll finish with you. The Sounders seem like on the field they may have benefited the most because they didn't have any. Well, no, they guess they had a couple players that got called up. Ladero got called up, like you said. Torres got called up. Valdez got called up. But like Morris ended up being able to get 2 weeks to heal when he was probably already kind of getting towards the end of his. He probably needed this rest time regardless of an injury or not. What's your feeling right now? If you was this a good break for the Sounders, even though they had all this momentum?
It definitely for on the field. It gave them the opportunity to get healthy, as we were talking about. That for them was important. And when you look at how MLS could structure things in between the 2 series, where they've had the break in middle of leg 1 and leg 2, which is just a horrible design. So at least this structure puts a natural place to pause if you're going to pause, and the pause before the MLS Cup makes a whole lot of sense. Gives people a lot of opportunity to figure out their flights and all. Okay, that's great. Any fan would much rather than just play through this, but you got to argue with FIFA of an international break during MLS, and that's just not going to work. So at this time, it's hard to figure out a better solution. And even with this being a better solution, you still wound up with key games on a Tuesday night.
All right, well, that's a good place to call it. I really appreciate you guys coming on. Again, if you are watching this, be sure to check out Burgundy Wave, Sounder at Heart, Waking the Red, Mount Royal Soccer. All 4 of those blogs are doing their darndest to make sure their fans are up to date on what's going on in the world of the MLS playoffs. We'll be back probably. We'll do this again, I think, next week after this first round of games, and then we'll take it from there. But in the meantime, I'm Jeremiah Shan signing off for SB Nation. We will see you around.